Welcome back to Man vs. Machine. I'm Bradley Stalder, along with me co-host Ryan Reynolds, and both of us are sporting the shades tonight. The future is bright in fantasy football land, but not so bright in the first round, Ryan. It's been an absolute massacre of fantasy football stars going down in the first 2 weeks due to injury. We're going to get into the fantasy football injury fallout that you need to know. We're going to talk a little bit about Calvin Ridley. And then we're going to talk some panic or patience for some players who have underperformed so far. And Ryan and I are going to give our feedback, a little bit of thoughts, analysis about whether we think these underperforming players will bounce back. Finally, I'll offer some flex plays that you should consider that exist outside of the top 50 projected players. And if you like the content and find it helpful, smash the subscribe button. We'll be answering your questions as well near the end. Ryan, how are you doing through 2 weeks?
You know, it's a grind, man. It's fun, though. So, and like you said, the injuries, last year was a bad year for injury. I've said a few times that last year's, I think, the ugliest football I've ever seen for over a whole season. This is not looking good so far here, pal, with all these injuries.
No, and we mostly avoided big injuries in the offseason. I was actually waiting for the other shoe to drop, in terms of, well, were we going to get a McCaffrey injury? Well, we did actually in the preseason. If maybe it took a little bit of reading the tea leaves, but there was rumblings about McCaffrey not being 100% with the Achilles and the calf. And, he's now going to be out for some time, placed on IR. And we talked a little bit about Jordan Mason being a viable replacement, but he once again, stepped up and was a mid to low end RB1. And I think he's going to continue to be that way. There's no pathway other than injury himself for Jordan Mason to not deliver on top 12 running back week to week as long as McCaffrey is out.
Yeah, I mean, especially, you have Debo too now on top of I think it's a hamstring that's an issue where usually when CMC misses time, Debo takes on more of that, Swiss Army knife role. So could see Mason seeing some more work in the passing game now by default. And if you've ever been a Brock Purdy doubter, now's the time where he's going to have to show that he can do it without the best offensive supporting cast in the league.
Shout out Theo Greminger. Here we go, baby. Theo shouting out Kittle season. And so I think you start all 49ers. Of course you want it, George Kittle. George Kittle, mid-pack, tight end 1, but solid floor now. Instead of just the spike week potential, we're going to see an increase in that floor. And Brandon Aiyuk has a 29% target share in games where Deebo Samuel is out. So I expect a little bit more for Jordan Mason in the passing game, because as you mentioned, Deebo Samuel was getting most of that work of close to line of scrimmage, the Christian McCaffrey passing work. But Jordan Mason, you're starting. Kittle, you're starting. You're auto starting. Brandon Aiyuk, I think now is in this starting position. We're going to talk more about Brandon Aiyuk in just a little bit, but this means we're firing up our San Francisco 49ers. But I agree with you. There is some trepidation about Brock Purdy. He's not looked great over his last 6 games, Ryan. Is that the NFL is starting to get more film on this player, or is it just he's going through a tough stretch? How are you feeling out Brock Purdy as a possible starter for our fantasy lineups?
Yeah, I'd say everyone in Minnesota had a rough day in Minnesota last week. Brian Flores has done a great job, so that doesn't really concern me. But I think even when Purdy was at the height of his powers, like a 263 touchdown game was kind of really good for him. He's never been like a fantasy superstar, I wouldn't say. He's just, like a good best ball player maybe. But yeah, I mean, I think most people would agree that Purdy's like a solid quarterback, but this wouldn't be happening in most NFL cities where, like, if Patrick Mahomes went to, Jacksonville, like Jacksonville would have a better situation right now.
Yeah. Yikes. No Evan Ingram. I pumped up Christian Kirk in my rankings for week 2, and boy, did that backfire. The Jaguars are on a downward spiral. I don't even have them in the major injury fallouts with Evan Ingram and whatnot, but it's so hard to distill what is the true Jacksonville Jaguars identity given all of these issues. and they just faced the Cleveland Browns, who have arguably the best defense in the NFL. Ryan, how are you approaching a struggling Jaguars team that is lost 6 in a row now?
Yeah, like you said, I'm not in panic mode, like, because of last week. The Browns have shut down plenty of high caliber offenses. But yeah, I mean, I think the word mediocre is the appropriate word going forward for just about everything associated with the Jacksonville offense. Although Brian Thomas continues to look like the best pass catcher they have already.
Brian Thomas season is upon us. We got more news today about Cooper Kupp. Sean McVay has declined, at least at this point, to place him on the injured reserve, said that there's a lot going on behind the scenes in terms of roster management, and that's being pointed to as a reason Kupp has not been placed on the IR, at least as of yet. I expect that he's going to be out a while. Puka Nacua was officially placed on the injured reserve. This is a massive deal because Cooper Kupp was in line to be in wide receiver 1 overall territory as long as Nacua was out. However, we're looking at this Rams wide receiver room. It's Demarcus Robinson, it's Jordan Whittington, right? Tutu Atwell, Tyler Johnson. You don't even have Tyler Higbee on this team yet. He's still on IR dealing with his torn ACL. There's been some calls for Matthew Stafford to get traded already. So what is the Rams' plan of attack here? Are they going to move more toward a Kyron Williams and Blake Corum pathway where they alternate those two running backs as the source of their offense now that their top wide receivers are out for some significant time?
Yeah, I mean, poor Matthew Stafford. I do think you're going to see both of those players on the field more in the near future. Sean McVay is an innovative play caller. He's definitely aware that that's now the strength of the offense. And, like you mentioned, that wide receiver room, at least Tutu Atwell's fast. He can be a bit of a field stretcher. And, I feel disgusting saying this, but Demarcus Robinson probably has the best chance to be a volume monster out of that group. So they have to generate offense from somewhere. And I imagine it's going to be creativity with their running backs.
Hopefully it is. I have far too much exposure to Blake Corum. It's an uncomfortable amount. Speaking of uncomfortable amounts of exposure to players, Ryan, I've talked about this for some time. AJ Brown has been my guy, but my guy is going to be out for some time with the hamstring injury. We saw Devonta Smith play very well in AJ Brown's absence. I mean, when don't we see Devonta Smith play well? But he definitely elevated his game. He was the number 1 read. Dallas Goedert really didn't step up, in the way that we had hoped. It was Saquon who got a lot of the work. And I think as long as Saquon is healthy, you're going to see Goddard put up mediocre performances. But the wide receiver too is Brian Covey for the Philadelphia Eagles, Ryan. Yikes. Are the Eagles in panic mode with AJ Brown out?
Yeah, I think they're one of the few rosters in the league that could mitigate this. I mean, because like you said, Devonta Smith fills the wide receiver 1 role. He's at least genuinely capable of that, unlike what we got going on in Los Angeles with the Rams right now. So I'd imagine you're going to see Smith moved all over the formation over the coming weeks, where one thing that, it's tough to say, did the Eagles know Brown was going to be out all week last week, or was this something that they had, some middling hopes for? So this week now we know he's out. So we'll see what their plan is for Smith now. And, when Kellen Moore is with Dallas, tight ends always saw very purposeful targets. So I could see a little bit more of that for Dallas Goedert, given the lack of other options in that passing attack.
Yeah, hoping that Goddard steps up. I've got a little bit of exposure to him as well. Lots of exposure to Philly. Unfortunately, AJ Brown out for a couple weeks with the hamstring injury. We did get definitive news about Isaiah Pacheco, out 6 to 8 weeks, a fractured fibula. There's going to be some interesting pieces moving in this Kansas City backfield. Obviously, Carson Steele, my girl, is back there. The fullback, beautiful locks. Doesn't he have an alligator as well? There's certainly an alligator narrative that's got to be connected to Carson Steele. However, Keontae Ingram was just added to the active roster. You also have Kareem Hunt, who was signed to the practice squad. You've got Samaje Perine, who was signed after he was cut from Denver. Is this just a mess and we're avoiding it? or is there someone that you're targeting in Kansas City that has stuck out to you and you're claiming your stake, Ryan? This is the guy while Pacheco is out for the next 6 to 8 weeks.
I do think it's going to be a mess. Like, I don't personally see it with Carson Steele. What I'll say about Pirine is when Pirine was cut, they signed him and they didn't sign Kareem Hunt until today or recently. So it would seem that they prefer Pirine. Keontae Ingram's a little bit interesting too. It might take him a while to get acclimated to the offense, but I could see him rising late. But again, I think this is going to be an absolute mess. Maybe Pirine inherits the old Jerick McKinnon role starting this week. So that's probably the one thing that I'd be a little bit bullish on.
Yeah. I mean, in my dynasty leagues, I put out feelers for Kareem Hunt. I haven't put much out for Keontae Ingram. Maybe that's worth a shot. Just those deep leagues, deep rosters, blah, blah, blah. But I agree with you. There's, it's going to be a mess. It's going to continue to be a mess. But if one pops up, if it is Samaje Perine, we've seen Darrell or Damian Williams step up in various places in the past. A Jerick McKinnon, a 30-something-year-old Jerick McKinnon coming off of knee reconstruction, stepping up in the past. We've seen veteran pass-catching running backs who have earned a role, be fantasy relevant for the Kansas City Chiefs. So there could be a gold mine here, but to discern which one it is, and now it's a kind of four-headed monster, Ryan. When you have 4 running backs, you have no running backs.
That's fair. I definitely don't have a strong stance. I think my order would be, if we're talking like next week, it would be Pirine, Steele. If we're talking 4 weeks from now, I think it would be Pirine, Hunt, Steele, Ingram.
I'm still Team Pirine. All right, Ryan. Well, the Tennessee Titans have not been great. They've not been great. They have been passing a lot. They've also been running a lot. They've not been. Will Levis has not looked very good. He's had, some very low light, like ESPN, not top 10 plays each of the last 2 weeks. Maybe he's eaten too much mayonnaise in his coffee. Whatever the case may be, he's had some bad plays. DeAndre Hopkins is also working his way back from the knee injury, which has limited his snaps the first couple weeks. We kind of knew that given the timeline of the injury and when we expected him to be back to full health. So for him to be playing, fine. But one of the recipients has been Calvin Ridley. Talk to me about your thoughts on Tennessee Titans offense and Calvin Ridley.
So we talked about this a little bit last week. Now it's through 2 games. Brian Callahan's really impressed me as a play caller. I think he's gotten the most out of a middling group against 2 of the better defenses in football. That's the real encouraging part for me. I think after this week against Green Bay, I could see this offense starting to take off a little bit. And the thing that's interesting about it, your guy Calvin Ridley, he seems to be the only game in town right now. He's clearly the most dynamic pass catcher they have, not even close. So, I said this on Twitter. Calvin Ridley this year looks more like Falcons Calvin Ridley than he did last year. So I think I'm glad you put me on him later in the draft season. I have some of them because of you, and I think that's going to be a winner this year, pal.
Yeah, if there's only 2 starting players for fantasy that you can fire up in your lineups from the Tennessee Titans, it's Calvin Ridley and it's Tony Pollard. We're going to talk a little bit more about Pollard later on in the show. And before we get into our panic or patience segment, it's a pretty lengthy one because there's been some disappointing players, Ryan. We're going to hear a word about our player rankings here at Player Profiler. Check them out.
Hey, this will just take a second. I want to talk about our player rankings, the weekly rankings, the weekly projections. Billy, Theo, and our analytics geniuses getting your start, sit decisions dialed in that flex tab. And then you get the season rankings. Want to make add drop decisions? The season rankings are updated every week, all year. And you have the best dynasty rankings ever as part of the player rankings package. And don't forget the offensive line rankings. Dan Fornick, one of the best in the business. New running back starting this week. Hey, is that offensive line top 10? Yeah, okay, start them. And we rank the cornerbacks out to like CB100 with the corresponding receiver they're going to be matched up with most this coming week. The player rankings are the thing you need during the season on PlayerProfiler.com. Check it out.
That's right, PlayerProfiler.com. Get the player rankings. Billy Muzio, myself, and Evan Wrangler our lead of analytics here at Player Profiler, work each week to get you both the weekly player rankings and the rest of season. I spent hours last night working on our rest of season rankings, and boy, it gets tedious, Ryan. I don't know if you've ever gone through that process of those projections and rankings in that type of manner, but it does get tedious.
Yeah, especially if you do it with someone else where there's like discussions on players, like you're talking, that can take a whole day. So yes, that's a grind, man. It is, but it's very valuable too. I'd say once the season starts, rest of season rankings are the thing I pay attention to the most.
We're going to pivot into our new segment, Panic or Patience. We're going to start in the quarterback position. Very early, Justin Herbert was being drafted at like quarterback 18, quarterback 16, somewhere around there, depending on the league. But there was hope. There was some hopium, Ryan, that Justin Herbert would be able to take the next steps in terms of being a passer, right? He started his career quarterback 7, 22.9 fantasy points per game. Then his sophomore season, quarterback 2 overall, 23.3. He regressed in 2022, still 17 fantasy points per game. 2023 experienced some injury, still quarterback 8 in fantasy points per game. But Ryan, he has let us down through 2 games, averaging 11.2 fantasy points per game, 27th overall. The projections, like my projections, were pretty low for him, but I didn't think he was going to be 27th. Is this the Harbaugh effect? Is this just the lack of a field stretcher with DJ Chark out and the offense isn't running the right way? Is it that J.K. Dobbins is taking the field by storm and they're just leaning into the run? Like, is there hope for Justin Herbert? He's quarterback 27 right now.
So I actually have a pretty strong stance on this whole thing. The league's been moving to the faster defenses, to faster, smaller defenses to better cover the pass. And what I've always thought is if you don't have one of these premium quarterbacks, it's in your best interest to become an uncomfortable matchup. The Chargers have done that on purpose. That's why they're run heavy. That's why they've run. J.K. Dobbins is leading the league in rushing. I've never seen a team do this with a guy like Justin Herbert, and so far he looks uncomfortable in this new system. So I think how we have to treat him for fantasy purposes is if they're playing Kansas City where they may have to come from behind, Herbert's worth streaming. But if they're playing any team where they can run, he's a very volatile option. And like you said, that we've been talking about this all offseason, the Chargers do not have a very good group of pass catchers. You could argue it's the worst in the league.
Right now, Justin Herbert averaging 23 pass attempts per game, 137 passing yards per game. Yes, he's completing his passes at one of the highest rates of his career, but 6.0 yards per attempt. That is disastrous. It's the lowest of his career so far. And 3 passing touchdowns is not going to get it done if you're also not rushing as much as Herbert had in the past. So certainly a player that I was lower on. There was Narrative Street to talk us into being low on Herbert, but I mean, Ladd McConkey, he's earned targets, but not deep targets. And DJ Chark has been out, and Quentin Johnston has somehow been a thing. Ryan, do you believe Quentin Johnston is for real?
I bet on him late a little bit in best ball. I'm overweight in Quentin Johnston, so the answer is this is a pleasant surprise. I'm not sure I actually believe, though. No, kind of more of a default production type deal.
Yeah, he's just a guy who's there. That's how a Jag. His best range of outcome includes being a Jag. But Ryan, we're going to flip the script on the quarterback position because this is a player who is being drafted much higher, around quarterback 12, quarterback 13, the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft in 2024, Caleb Williams out of USC. Quarterback 31, 8.3 fantasy points per game, 4.0 yards per attempt, 56% completion percentage. I know Keenan Allen's been dealing with the heel issue. Roma Dunze has a knee thing going on. But Caleb Williams he's shown a little bit of magic here and there, but to consistently string things together, we're looking at quarterback 31, certainly not paying off what people were hoping for at such an investment, like round 10 investment in a quarterback we were hoping would get to 4,000 yards. He is not on pace for that.
No. I mean, he's definitely unplayable in fantasy right now. I'm not really concerned about him long term. Houston's defense, especially their pass rush was, Will Anderson and Daniel Hunter is one of the better edge rush duos in the league. The Bears' offensive line has been like a full tier or two below like what most expected. They're like a bottom 5-6-ish unit so far. So that's been a problem. And the other thing, especially against Houston, there really wasn't a whole lot there. Not a lot of separation, not a lot of anything. So I'm hoping that's a bit of an aberration and things improve, but you definitely can't start Caleb Williams now. He should be considered a streamer in just about everywhere outside of 2 quarterback leagues.
Yeah, here's the interesting thing. Caleb Williams, 31st in adjusted yards per attempt, but 13th in air yards per attempt. He's just not connecting downfield. It's a real problem. He's 19th in money throws, 9th in danger plays. At least here's what Chicago is doing. They're at least picking up the pace a little bit. They're 12th in team pass plays per game and 8th in pace of play. They've been playing from behind, though, and that's kind of put the pressure on Caleb to be able to make those plays, and he's just thrown to the wolves right off the bat. So you can't expect this player who's not taking snaps in the NFL outside of these 2 games to elevate in this way. Look, I think better days are ahead for Caleb Williams. I think you'll agree with that.
Yeah.
But because there are some things that are positive, I think more positive than the Justin Fields situation from last year. Yeah. However, we're looking at a player that you're just going to have to wait. You're going to have to wait a while to see Caleb Williams, boom, come along. So, yeah, I agree with you. He's unstartable until further notice.
Yeah, agreed. I'm not worried about him long term, but yeah, absolutely unplayable. Probably for the next 3 weeks, even if he does well in the next week or 2.
Before we move on, I made a trade for Caleb Williams in Dynasty, Ryan. I want to get some feedback. Maybe I made a blunder, maybe not. 1 quarterback, 16 team league. I swapped Caleb Williams. I received him and a 2nd round pick for Joe Burrow and Rico Dowdle.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm crazy about that, but I will say this. I do think Caleb Williams 2 or 3 years or a year or 2 from now will be in that same relative cluster. So I actually said during the Texans game to my buddy that 2 or 3 years from now, I could see Texans Bears being a Super Bowl preview. So Ooh. I don't think I would have swung that, but I still like Caleb Williams.
Fair enough. We will move on to the running back position. There haven't been a ton of duds in terms of massive running back issues outside of injuries. We really I wanted to stick away in this conversation, move away from the injuries, because the reality is we drafted players knowing that there's always injury risk to each of the players. Bijan Robinson has stayed healthy, knock on wood, right? Breece Hall has stayed healthy, knock on wood. Achane has been healthy, right? So we've seen a lot of those. DeAndre Swift has stayed healthy. Not DeAndre Swift. Jahmyr Gibbs has stayed healthy. So we've seen a lot of these earlier running backs, at least stay healthy and not completely tank your teams. But it was these like round 8, 9, 10 running backs in that range. Maybe the post dead zone or like the end of the dead zone that has really hurt. We'll talk about Zamir White here for Vegas, because even just in week 1, like the panic meter was absolute like DEFCON 3 red for Zamir White after week 1. And now he's 2 games in, only 11 rush attempts per game, only 34 rushing yards per game, 3.1 yards per carry. He is running back 45 in PPR, running back 47.5 PPR. Ryan, yikes. Are better days ahead for Zamir White? Was week 1 an aberration, or, is Alexander Mattison going to continue to be a thorn in the side of Zamir White?
Yeah, I think Madison's going to, that could be like a 60-40, 50-50 type split all year. I don't really mind too much about the Ravens game last week because most teams can't really run in Baltimore. I've liked that you leaned in a week one more. That's more concerning. And here's the thing, man. If they don't have any success on the ground this week against the Panthers, that's we go from the panic meters at like a 3.5 right now. That becomes like a baseline flat line 0 after that. So I'm on the verge of being in full panic mode with Zamir White, even though I don't have a lot of them.
Yeah. We didn't believe that the Las Vegas Raiders would be a good offense. That's the thing, is we knew Devontae Adams would get his. We thought Brock Bowers, elite tight end prospect, wondered how quickly he would come along. He's come along pretty quickly, to say the least. Jacoby Myers is also a respectable piece that I just don't think is hit yet for Vegas. But Zamir White looking like one of those Mike Davis, players from years past. If you want to use a comp where maybe we weren't paying necessarily 5th round, early 6th round Mike Davis prices, Zamir White was more like end of 7th, beginning of 8th round. But still, like, if you were going 0 RB and putting chips in on like Zamir White could be my running back too, like a nice floor guy. The floor is much scarier with this Alexander Madison involvement.
Yeah, agreed. I couldn't agree more. Mike Davis is the scary, gruesome comp. You just got him cheaper, thankfully.
Yeah, I remember a debate I had with Billy Muzio about Mike Davis, and let's just say I won that one. Shout out to you, Billy. Love you. We'll keep in the running back position. Another dud so far. Chase Brown. So Chase Brown was projecting as the pass catching back. He had the highest yards per route run among qualified running backs last year. He was viewed as the 1B in this Cincinnati offense pretty much all preseason. There was talk, is it actually going to be Zach Moss as the lead running back for Cincinnati? We knew it was going to be a valuable fantasy landing spot. And the question was, will Chase Brown take the next step? Chase Brown has 33% and 20% of snaps over the first 2 weeks, Ryan. Major panic mode, running back 42 and 54 during that time. He's running back 52 on the season. Is there hope on the horizon, or are we just looking down another Chris Evans?
I like that. I think he's a stash. The one thing that I'd say is Zach Moss hasn't really done much. So there is a path to him maybe getting more work over the coming weeks. But, this is also a correction spot coming against Washington, where the strength of their defense is their defensive interior. So this will probably be Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase night come Monday. But, we'll see. I think he's a stash. Treat him like a premium stash right now.
Treating him like a premium stash. The other interesting thing is that the Cincinnati Bengals are running the fewest run plays per game through the first 2 weeks. Now, part of that was they're trying to play catch up with, in week 1, the New England Patriots of all teams, and the Patriots had a game plan that was a run the clock and run the game out and try to beat them there. But do you have organizational concerns? We're going to take a step back. Do you have organizational concerns about Cincinnati from like the Jamar Chase outburst and we'll talk about Chase in a little bit, but like as a whole organization, like there was off-season drama about, trade requests, T. Higgins dealing with the hamstring injuries, Trey Hendrickson making requests to be traded. How much of these off-season, preseason distractions is affecting the chemistry of this team moving forward in Cincinnati?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say I have organizational concerns there. They basically just landed Joe Burrow, and when Joe Burrow's not there, I view them as the Cleveland Browns essentially, except the Browns actually have a good roster. So yes, I don't view this as a great organization. Average head coach. The defensive coordinator is really the only, figurehead that I'd call above average. That's not Joe Burrow.
Oh, that's not Joe Burrow. Well, we will stick with the running back position. Our last running back that we'll look at is out of Denver. There was a lot of love in the offseason, Ryan. You hit the Twitter streets as hard as I do. You saw the Jaleel McLaughlin propaganda. And I'm sure you remember my tweets. Is this your king? Your 5'8", 187 king? Is this your king? Yikes. It's disastrous for Jaleel McLaughlin. He's currently RB 67, averaging 2.5 yards per carry. He has 5 receptions for 1 receiving yard on the season, Ryan. He has a single receiving yard. Jaleel McLaughlin. My biggest concern was that he would not get the snaps. 31%, 23% of snaps.
Yeah, that's about what I was. Yeah, that's about what I was expecting. He's fast. He's a talented player, but like 1 year in a bad offense, and I was with you. Like I never saw volume coming. I think it's going to take an absolute disaster for him to see major volume. So, yeah, I'm not overly surprised. He's a better NFL asset than he is a fantasy player. Is how I'd frame it.
A better NFL asset. It's a shame that Audric Estime is on IR because Javonte Williams is also pooping the bed. And Estime is the truth, guys. Estime is the truth. Oh my gosh. Let me pound the table. Pound the table for Audric Estime. If your league has IR slots, go stash Audric Estime and just land him on the IR. Like, what does it hurt? We know that Sean Payton loves to use his running backs in the passing game. It can be fantasy viable. Audric Estime has the 3-down skill set, but he's on IR. Stash him away. Anything to add about Denver backfield, Ryan?
Nope. I don't have a ton of enthusiasm in that offense in general, so I'm going to be pretty much staying away. Although, you may have talked me into the rookie runner. I might do that on a few teams. Stash him on IR.
What does it hurt? What does it hurt? These are the types of things that, we could be looking at week 16, week 17, Audric Estime being the guy. Who knows? Well, we've beaten down the running back spot a little too much. But now it's time to really feel the pain with all these wide receivers who have let us down. We'll start with Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson was being drafted at the 1-2 turn pretty comfortably. He's now the wide receiver 35, only 117 receiving yards through 2 games, 5 receptions, 55 yards, no touchdowns, only 156 air yards, Ryan. And he's got the target share. He's got the red zone targets. He's got the routes run. What is wrong with Garrett Wilson? Why are we not seeing fantasy points? Are we to be patient with him, or is it time to press the panic button?
I'm probably a little concerned, maybe. 2 tough matchups. The Titans have Snead, who's one of the better cornerbacks in the league, and the 49ers pass rush kind of took over week 1. But the reason why I'm a little concerned is, and it's not a real surprise, Aaron Rodgers is going to be 41 in December. Like, he's not as mobile as he used to be. He still, makes throws that no one else can really, but the other factor is that outside of their running backs, the Jets don't really have anything even resembling a second option. Like you'll see Allen Lazard spikes here and there because Rodgers' game is very, very based on timing and he's familiar with him. But, defenses can pay too much attention to Wilson on obvious passing downs, and I've seen too much of that so far.
Yeah, the other teams don't respect the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. Tyler Conklin isn't getting anything in this Jets offense. It's kind of bizarre. Here's a fun fact, Ryan. Are you ready?
I am.
Allen Lazard was the wide receiver 11 in expected rate of top 5 weeks in 2022.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think. No, that was the year that I was overweight on in best ball just because they had nothing there. And yeah, I mean, that did not age well. That's for sure. That did not age well.
Yikes. Allen Lazard, he's going to be boom bust. Wide receiver 2. Mike Williams also working his way back from the ACL injury. Now, we kind of hinted at the Cincinnati issues. Jamar Chase, was being drafted as a mid wide receiver 1 in the first round of our fantasy drafts. He's currently the wide receiver 44. He's had the contract disputes and holdouts and, you name it for Jamar Chase this offseason. He just hasn't dealt with the injuries. He's 97 receiving yards on 10 receptions, 11 targets. We know what the ceiling is for this guy. We know what the ceiling is. It's wide receiver 1 overall. It's, he was the wide receiver 5 his rookie year. He was the wide receiver 4 his sophomore year. But he's the wide receiver 41 through 2 weeks, Ryan. We talked about the organizational concerns for Cincinnati. I know that it's typically a tough matchup against Kansas City. That's something to keep in mind. And there were some flags of plays that could have led to more fantasy points throughout the game. But are we just going to expect spike weeks and dud games like the rest of the season?
Yeah. Week 1's kind of like a mulligan because, again, like the contract stuff, like when I was drafting in May, I wasn't really expecting that with a guy with 2 years left on his deal to be holding out like into the first, up until like the first week of the season. Last week, Steve Spagnuolo, he did it with the Ravens in week 1. He basically took Mark Andrews away. Did the same thing this week where, coincidentally, the Chiefs have been murdered by tight ends so far. Isaiah Likely went nuts on him. Mike Gesicki had 91 yards receiving last week, and he dropped a pretty wide open pass. So that was a game plan thing. If he doesn't blow up Washington this week, I will then become quite concerned, especially because I have quite a bit of chase.
Yeah, that the difference between Washington secondary and facing off with a Trent McDuffie or, a Christian Gonzalez. Christian Gonzalez, he's real good. He's real good for New England. So, certainly a player that we think better days are ahead, but you may have to live with your lumps. And if he can't produce against Washington, we might be waiting a while for a Jamar Chase bounce back. Ryan, we're going to stick with the wide receiver position and with a team that's kind of surprising that this player is even on this list, right? Given that the New Orleans Saints have put up 40 burgers in consecutive games, Chris Olave has not been a big part of the game plan. 8 targets through 2 games, 6 receptions, averaging 46 receiving yards per game. But Derek Carr is playing out of his mind. There was someone who went on, I think it was TikTok, and he made a video about how Derek Carr during election years is like MVP level. We go back to 2016, and Derek Carr's like, there's literally, he pulled up like receipts of Raiders fans calling for Derek Carr to be MVP. And then, in 2020, Derek Carr puts up his best passer rating of his career. And now we're in 2024, and Derek Carr, 5 passing touchdowns through 2 games and, an insane passer rating. However, Chris Olave has not been a part of that. Wide receiver 55 on the year in full point, wide receiver 53.5 point. Is it just a matter of time where Chris Olave is going to get into the fun, or is this an offense where we're just going to see ebbs and flows of players, and this is an offense you're buying into?
I'd like Clint Kubiak coming in, but I wasn't expecting 40 points in both games to start off the year. They've been max protecting a lot where they're only running 2 or 3 guys out in routes, which, when you're running, the league primarily plays zone now. So that's something that's been working for them. I assume teams are going to adjust to that. And, it's, despite like how many points the Saints scored against Dallas last week, they actually didn't throw that much either. So volume wasn't like massive last week. So I think Olave will be better. I think the Saints will come back to earth a little bit, especially down this tough schedule stretch. But yeah, I mean, that said, they're still going to exceed my expectations as an offense this year, where I thought Dennis Allen was going to get fired by like week 15, basically.
Yeah. The Saints take on the Philadelphia Eagles this week in New Orleans. So Philly against Philly on a short week. Sure, Chris Olave, better days are ahead. But is Rashid Shaheed a player that you're interested in firing up in starting lineups now?
Yeah, I think that would be matchup based. I've always liked speedsters, especially in best ball. But a couple years ago, before Henry Ruggs' terrible off-field incident, like he started to have some pretty good success with Derek Carr too in a very similar role. So yeah, I think this could continue to a degree at least.
All right, Rashid Shaheed could continue. We kind of mentioned Brandon Aiyuk earlier. Talk about like going full nuclear mode in the offseason regarding contracts. Jamar Chase sat out a couple practices. Literally, it was every other day that it was Brandon Aiyuk getting traded to the Steelers, Brandon Aiyuk getting traded to the Commanders, to the Patriots, you name it. Brandon Aiyuk stays in San Francisco. And then in his first game against the Jets, makes a drop. He had a bad drop, but in the end zone. But I thought it was actually kind of funny, Ryan. I'm sure you saw the game. You heard the commentary from the play-by-play. They wouldn't let it go. They were like dogs with a bone, like Brandon Aiyuk. Man, he should have had that. Yeah, he really should have had that. Oh, man, think about how he should have had that. And like it went on for like 90 seconds, like a Statler and Waldorf, almost scenario where they were just not letting Brandon Aiyuk, go from that bad drop. But Aiyuk right now, wide receiver 63.5 point scoring. He is wide receiver 63 in full point. With Debo, with Christian McCaffrey, both nursing injuries, what is the ceiling now for Brandon Aiyuk?
Oh, he's the main vein in the passing attack. He's paid like a top 5 receiver. I don't think he is. But now he gets an opportunity to show it, especially after, like you said, having a drama-filled offseason where, you got paid, man. Like, that's why I don't think I would have went on a tirade about him dropping a touchdown pass. But, you are going to get those kind of comments when you hold out. And I do, like, I'm definitely playing. I'm going to be overweight on him in DFS, even if the field's crazy high on him. So I definitely think he's going to be the primary beneficiary of especially Debo being injured.
I think so too. We're looking at Brandon Aiyuk, who going into week 3 has a 17% target share. I think that easily exceeds 25% as we're going into week 3, San Francisco. We're also looking at a wide receiver who may benefit from the absence of others. Nathaniel Tank Dell, wide receiver 70 right now. But Nico Collins did not practice today due to multiple injuries. I think it's a hip and a knee injury, a hip and a leg injury. But Tank Dell, 4 receptions through 2 games, 37 receiving yards, wide receiver 73 in full point, 70.5 point. If Nico Collins misses, we're looking at a player who can get up into the 20-something% target share. Yes, only 4 receptions, but 11 targets. That's respectable.
Yeah, I think he'll be fine. Again, like last Sunday's night's matchup against the Bears have a great secondary, really good pass defense in general. So that's kind of a mulligan for me. He'll have easier matchups pretty much throughout the year. So, and like you said, I think if Collins goes out, I actually think I'd like in a 1-versus-1, I think I'd actually lean Tank Dell over Stephon Diggs.
Same.
Small lean, but his role's been solid. Playing time's been good, snaps have been good. So, I think better days are ahead of him too, especially because CJ Stroud is just a great player. Like, I'd say he's even a little better so far from what I've seen than he was last year.
Dell for the season so far, 88% of routes. So he's not being pulled off as much as we anticipated. He is still coming back from that injury that cost him the last few games of the season, but he's run the deep routes, 17th in average target distance, 14th in deep targets, 10th in unrealized air yards. Just need a little bit more boom. And we've seen Tank Dell boom in the past. All we need is a couple big plays from Dell. He's very much on the flex consideration train for week 3, even without Nico Collins, or even if Nico Collins plays, still considering Tank Dell as a flex consideration. All right, Michael Pittman, even lower on this list. Michael Pittman's earning all the targets in Indy, but not making anything happen from it. Alec Pierce has been the fantasy points guy. Josh Downs has been dealing with the injuries, but what is it going to take for Michael Pittman to become more fantasy relevant, to have those targets come to fruition, Ryan?
That one's probably, of all the, like, we've talked about a bunch of quality receivers in a row. This is the one I'm the most concerned about mainly because of Anthony Richardson, just a volatile passer. He was terrible in Green Bay last week. Again, I'm not sure where the Colts tried to attack Green Bay through the air. that's been one of the worst run defenses in the league for years, and they have Jonathan Taylor, so that's bewildering. But another thing I'll add is Adonai Mitchell has created separation deep 4 or 5 times already this year, and they just haven't landed one. So maybe there's some positive regression coming for Anthony Richardson, but he just looks like he's going to be a boom bust type player as a passer, at least in the short term. So I was higher than market on Pittman before the season. I feel like I'm going to end up being wrong on that from what I've seen so far.
Yeah, right now Pittman is first in route participation among wide receivers, 10th in target share, 11th in unrealized air yards. So you talk about AD Mitchell missing out. It's also been Michael Pittman who has been missing out. The volatility, you're right on, is there for Anthony Richardson. He's talk about boom bust like wide receivers. He's a boom bust quarterback, Ryan.
He is. No, again, the ceiling is sky high, but we have to see more consistency out of him. And we may not. And maybe Jalen Hurts has been inconsistent since his Super Bowl run. So maybe we're looking at a semi-worse version of that as a passer, at least.
Well, you know who is with Jalen Hurts during his Super Bowl run? Shane Steichen, currently working with Anthony Richardson. We're going to continue with the wide receiver room because it has been so disappointing. If we just keep going, Ryan, it has been a murderer's row of wide receivers. Whew. Terry McLaurin, wide receiver 76 in fantasy points per game and half point scoring, 67 in full point. I think the most surprising thing for McLaurin, 4.9 yards per reception. Like, what? Make that make sense.
No, I mean, my guy Adam Levitan coined the phrase a few years ago. He called Cliff Kingsbury a fake sharp. And when Kingsbury was in Arizona, he'd literally have DeAndre Hopkins like running most of his routes from like one spot,
yes,
doing like curls over and over again. And we're doing the same thing to Terry McLaurin. And like it actually, like you can probably even hear it in my voice, like it literally upsets me. So I have no hope here because of Cliff Kingsbury.
There is no hope for Terry McLaurin. Get out while you still can. What is the phrase? Abandon hope, all ye who enter here.
Yeah. Right? It's a shame, man, because it should work. But again, I didn't look at the data for week 2, but in week 1, like he literally just had Terry McLaurin doing the same thing. He had DeAndre Hopkins doing for the most part.
It was like 72% of like the same spot. It's outrageous. Just yikes. Okay, Ryan, we had a major shakeup just 2 days ago. Major shakeup in Carolina. Bryce Young hitting the bench. Dave Canales is coaching for his job. He wants to win games. He's sick and tired of losing. After 2 games, Bryce Young not working out for Carolina. They get blown out in week 1 and then just look disastrous in week 2. You could see the visibility of frustration on many of the wide receivers' faces. Diontae Johnson was being drafted. We talked up Diontae Johnson. Diontae Johnson, 140 target. Diontae Johnson. They went out. The offense is going to run through Diontae Johnson. That was what the coach speak was all offseason. But right now, the offseason, the offense has been run through the defense. Ultimately, like more passes have been completed to the other team. It feels like for Carolina right now, Diontae Johnson, 12 targets, 5 receptions, 34 receiving yards. He's the wide receiver, 83.5 point, 81 in full point. It's gross. Is the red rifle going to bring life back into Diontae Johnson's fantasy value?
Yeah, I think he'll bring some stability. Talking about volatile organization, if someone offers you the Panthers job, just say no. But yes, I think he'll be good for Johnson. Probably starts this week. But yes, it's been a disaster. I, kind of beside myself a little bit with what I've seen out of the Panthers the first 2 weeks.
Did you hear the story about Ryan Poles, how he interviewed for the Carolina job?
I have not, no.
Yeah. So he reportedly interviewed for the Carolina job, before the Chicago job, and he didn't get it, obviously. So he held that chip on his shoulder, got the Chicago job, and then proceeded to fleece them with arguably the worst trade. I mean, it's got to be, if it's not the worst trade in NFL history, it's got to be up there in the same Mount Rushmore, right?
Yeah.
Holy buckets. And the Panthers are still paying their 2025 second. Like, we still haven't seen it all come to fruition yet, Ryan. And we can already say this is arguably one of the worst trades in NFL history.
I didn't know. I didn't realize that there was a personal event that it attached to it. It makes me like it even more.
Phenomenal. We've got a few more players that we're going to talk about, panic or patience. If you like the content, find it helpful, smash the subscribe button, follow Ryan on X at Ryan Reynolds NFL, not Vancini Reynolds. That is a less good looking alias. However, you can follow me on the X machine at FF Stalder, Bradley Stalder. I'm the director of news here at Player Profiler. We host Man vs. Machine every Wednesday in season, 9 p.m. Eastern. So check it out. Subscribe to the podcast as well. We're on Apple. We're on Spotify. We're on those places. So you can listen to it on your rides home. Check it out. Man versus Machine. Bradley Stalder, Ryan Reynolds with you. Amari Cooper, wide receiver 91. There was a brief moment where I was celebrating Jameis Winston getting a snap at quarterback in week 2. I said, praise God. Thank you. The football gods are listening. We need Jameis Winston in this offense to unlock the Browns' offensive weapons. And instead, it's still Amari Cooper getting 20-something% of the targets, but doing nothing with them. Deshaun Watson looks absolutely abhorrent. Gross. Ryan, will it take a quarterback change to get Amari Cooper back on track?
Yeah, I don't think Jameis Winston's a good NFL quarterback. Like, I wouldn't be in a hurry to play him either. But for fantasy purposes, we want 5,000 yards and 40 interceptions. That's wonderful. And if that happens, that might be what it takes for Cooper. Otherwise, like, you have to catch him in the right matchup.
Cooper is like, talk about spike week, like winners. Every year, like once a year, he has a 50 burger. Like, you never know when it's going to come. He'll have like his 12s, his 18s, his 5s, but just one game. If you can nail down his one game that he has a 50 burger, oh boy. Right now, Amari Cooper, 17 targets. That's what's encouraging, but only 27 receiving yards.
It's unbelievable.
27 receiving yards, 243 air yards.
Yeah, I bet he's thrilled he's not in Dallas anymore.
Yeah, number 1 in unrealized air yards. Amari Cooper. The Browns will continue to brown, and they still beat the Jaguars for what it's worth.
They did.
Speaking of the Jaguars, Christian Kirk. As I said earlier, I expected Christian Kirk to be the man with Evan Ingram out. Like, I thought, okay, they moved the slot guy out. It's going to be now Christian Kirk in the slot. You got Brian Thomas. You got Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis is leading this team in targets through 2 weeks, Ryan. What's wrong with Christian Kirk? He's wide receiver 99 in PPR.
It's one of the great mysteries to me, too. No volume, especially with Evan Ingram being out. You'd think that would actually help Christian Kirk, because that's kind of the area of the field where he operates. He's like a short intermediate crosser runner. Yeah. Part of it's the Browns. Like, that's why I'm not in full blown, like, dude, what the hell is going on here? Because the Browns shut down a lot of teams, but we're getting to the point now where it's like, is Christian Kirk like genuinely droppable for, stash running backs? Like, we're a couple of weeks away from asking that question.
I mean, it was Miami in week 1. He had 1 catch for 30 yards.
Yeah.
On 72% of snaps. Certainly that's a little lower than what we would expect, but with Evan Ingram out, we'd expect some more targets. All right, enough. I feel like my soul is hurting after doing that review of all of these wide receivers. We still have the tight ends to do. We've got 4 tight ends left. Mark Andrews, tight end 16, bounced back from a tough week 1. Isaiah Likely also regressed. I think better days are ahead for Mark Andrews. Yeah,
me too. He's I'd say at least in the red zone, he's Lamar Jackson's most trusted pass catcher. I think Zay Flowers is now the Ravens' best pass catcher, but I think Mark Andrews will be fine from this point forward.
one point I want to make about Sam Laporta. I know he's tight end 18 and has let a lot of people down so far, that 2-3 turn. In FFPC, I was high on him, but in, the half PPR, full PPR, I was a little bit lower. We have to keep in mind he was dealing with an injury this preseason that went mostly underreported, that I think has hampered him through the first couple weeks. And they've wanted to get Jameson Williams involved. They wanted to establish that confidence right off the bat. I think that's been part of the game plan. So I think a little bit more uptick for Laporta. And this is going to be the perfect matchup, right? It's Detroit and Arizona, one of the highest over-unders of the week. I think this is a get-right game for Sam Laporta.
Yeah, I think he'll have his moments, but like you said, I think Jameson Williams, I don't think this is going to be a temporary thing. I think he's going to be a main vein in this offense as long as he's healthy. So I think the volume will be down a little bit, but the truth is the Lions also need to be better in the red zone, and that's kind of his wheelhouse. So
yes,
I could see a couple touchdown game coming, maybe even this week.
Ooh, love it. Love the call. Dalton Kincaid, tight end 25. The offense for the Bills has been pretty flat, and they've been leaning very heavily into James Cook, of course, who had the 3-tutty game. And also Ray Davis has been getting some carries in the backfield as well. Dalton Kincaid, we've seen teams move away from the tight end targets if they lean more into the running back targets and running back usage. So I don't think tight end 25 is necessarily where he's going to, land, but is Dalton Kincaid, still in that top 8 conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely am overweight on Kincaid. He was one of the guys that I liked coming into the season. I wanted his upside, and last week he caught the first 2 targets of the game. He got hurt. Buffalo jumped out to a lead. They only threw 19 passes, I think. So not super worried about last week, but in general, I'm definitely more afraid now than I was 3 weeks ago. That's for sure.
The last tight end that we'll mention, Travis Kelce, aka Taylor Swift's boyfriend, is tight end 29. And, is Ryan, the big question is this the age cliff hitting Travis?
I think it started to show last year, even though he's still productive. But yeah, he's his playing time's been down. Rashee Rice operates in the same area of the field for the most part. And while I wouldn't call Rashee Rice a great player, he's become the main vein in the Chiefs passing attack. So yeah, I think Kelce will have his moments, but yeah, I think the Travis Kelce of old is no more.
Yeah, we're looking at maybe top 12, barely, if that. I agree with you about the Rice thing. Rice, a 30% target share to begin the season. And with Hollywood Brown out, I don't think those roles really shift too much either later on in the season. And now, maybe with Pacheco being out, we could see a little uptick in Travis Kelce targets. So
True.
Something to consider. Just to let you guys know, I am big in on flexing starting. We talked about Jameson Williams. We're here for that. We believe Ryan and I are big believers. Rashid Shaheed, this is a great matchup, explosion game matchup possibility against the Eagles on a short week at home. Tony Pollard is also a player that will run all over Green Bay here in week 3. So those are my flex plays for the week. Ryan, any thoughts before we do maybe like a couple rapid fire questions before we call it for the night?
Well, let me say this about Jameson Williams. This is a little bold. If he's back to full strength at the height of his powers, I think he's better than Amon-Ra St. Brown.
You love to hear it. You love to hear it. Jameson Williams, for the record, is Player Profiler's week 3 projected wide receiver 12.
Stealing's huge, man. And like you said with Pollard, I love that too. Potential smash spot in Green Bay, who cannot stop the run.
They can't. They let everybody run all over them. Is Quentin Johnson a dynasty buy? I don't like buying Jags.
Yeah, I have the same response. If you can get him cheap, like his environment's good, and he still has the first round draft capital, but I don't have a ton of enthusiasm.
Think Akers is a decent spot start if Mixon is out. Yeah. I think so. Dameon Pierce dealing with an injury himself. Joe Mixon, MRI came back clean, but still majorly questionable for this week. So I like Akers as a volume running back 2 consideration.
Yeah, I picked him up for this week in the league. I'm with you on that.
Okay, who would we grab off the waiver wire? Josh Downs or Darnell Mooney?
I would grab Darnell Mooney personally.
Yeah, we like those big plays, and Kirk Cousins finally showed a couple of them in week 2 against the Eagles. Let's see. As a contender with CMC, is Mason worth a late 25 first? I'm looking to sell Mason if I can get 25 firsts, even if they're late.
Yeah, definitely. Unless you're the best team in the league and Mason's going to be a key piece to you like getting there, which doesn't even make sense because he's not going to probably be playing in the playoffs. I'm doing that in almost all circumstances.
Should I bet on Carson Steele? Is he going to help me more than Dotto or Javonte Williams? That's gross.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like I think he belongs at the bottom of that pile, but he's still in that relative pile.
Yikes. So gross. Give me if I have to pick one of the 3, give me Rico Dotto.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Well, great, Ryan. Any last words for the people before we sign off for week 3?
It's still only been 2 weeks. Don't overreact, especially when it's with young players, or if like it's something like Jalen Hurts not being able to run anymore. Like be a little patient. Kirk Cousins will be fine too.
Kirk Cousins will be fine. Have a little bit of patience. Thanks for tuning in for Panic or Patience on Man vs. Machine. Ryan Reynolds, Bradley Stalder. Till next time, good luck in the fantasy football streets, everybody.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to PlayerProfiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, Data Analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.